The sudden sharpness of the flight attendant's voice sliced through the soft hum of passengers settling into their seats. "Excuse me, girls, but you'll need to vacate these seats. First class is reserved for other passengers." Her words hung in the air, jarring and out of place, almost surreal, especially given the luxurious surroundings. The twins, no older than 12, blinked in confusion, their eyes flicking from the window back to the flight attendant. Their faces were a mixture of disbelief and shock. It wasn't that they didn't belong here. Of course they did. The plush leather seats, the calm serenity of the cabin, the rich aromas of gourmet meals and fresh linen, all of it was a world they had become accustomed to, thanks to their father. They fit here, and they knew it. The flight attendant's voice came again, stern and unwavering. "I'm afraid this is a mistake." Her gaze flickered for a moment, almost apologetic, but it quickly steeled itself. Ava and Naomi exchanged uneasy glances, the only sign of their rising anxiety. What was going on? What had they done? This wasn't like any other encounter with a flight attendant in first class. Something felt wrong. Then, cutting through the tension like a blade, a voice, deep and smooth, rang out. "Is there a problem here?" The cabin fell silent. All eyes snapped toward the man who stood in the doorway to first class. It was him, their father. In that moment, every passenger in the cabin recognized him, not just for his face, but for the undeniable presence he carried. The authority he exuded was palpable. The tension in the flight attendant's posture, the rigidity of her uniform, the quick flick of her eyes toward the man. It was clear that this wasn't a simple mistake over seating. The father's voice, calm yet with a subtle weight to it, filled the air again. "Why are my daughters being asked to leave?" The flight attendant hesitated, her gaze shifting nervously between the girls and the man. Why was she so reluctant to provide an answer? What was really at stake here? Why was she challenging these children's right to sit in first class? And why was she acting so cautious when looking at the father? Let me introduce the father, a man whose very essence had been shaped by his relentless drive to get where he was. His name was Jasper King, a man of extraordinary accomplishments, a celebrated entrepreneur, a former Olympic gold medalist, and one of the wealthiest individuals on the planet. But it wasn't just his wealth that commanded respect. It was the quiet strength he carried, an aura of determination and grit. Jasper had worked his entire life to provide his family with the very best. This moment, this unexpected confrontation over something as trivial as a seat on a plane, was about much more than just a mix-up in the seating chart. It was about respect. It was about the dignity of his children. It was about the legacy he had painstakingly built. Jasper had fought through unimaginable challenges to ensure that his daughters would have opportunities he had never had. For someone to challenge their right to sit in the seat they had been assigned, well, that was something he simply couldn't let slide. Jasper had always been a man of patience. He had learned to remain calm in the face of adversity. But even the most patient man has his limits. And this flight attendant? She was dangerously close to testing those limits. The flight attendant didn't budge. Her eyes narrowed, a silent dare in them, as though she was waiting for him to challenge her further. In that moment, the entire cabin felt as though it was holding its breath, suspended in time. There was an unspoken tension in the air, something simmering just below the polite surface of first class. Ava, the quieter of the two twins, spoke up first. Her voice, though barely a whisper, was firm as she said, "We've been assigned these seats." Naomi, always the more assertive one, quickly added, "Please, let us stay. We haven't done anything wrong." The flight attendant, clearly running out of patience herself, responded, "I'm sorry, but your seats were a mistake. You'll need to move." But before she could finish, Jasper's voice, low and commanding, cut through the air once more. "Perhaps you should check with the pilot," he said coldly, the words almost chilling in their finality. The tension between Jasper and the flight attendant reached a boiling point. He demanded to know the reason behind this absurd request. And as the flight attendant continued to refuse to offer any real explanation, what had started as a simple seating mix-up began to look more and more like something far uglier, a subtle, uncomfortable prejudice. Jasper's calm facade was beginning to crack, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. The twins, feeling the growing unease, turned their eyes to him, wondering just how far things would go. The twins, uncertain but trusting their father completely, didn't fully understand what was happening. They knew one thing for certain, though. He had their back. They couldn't grasp the reasoning behind this situation, but they were certain he wouldn't let anyone harm them. As the flight attendant supervisor was called, a ripple of unease spread through the cabin. Whispers quickly followed, passengers beginning to murmur among themselves. The twins' innocent faces, their calm in the face of this escalating conflict, caught the attention of those around them. Something was clearly off, but what exactly? How far would this go? Was the pilot involved in this situation too? Jasper's gaze never left the flight attendant. His mind was already working, piecing together everything that had just occurred. He had lived his whole life with people questioning him, doubting his worth. He had always risen above it, but this time, this wasn't just about him. This was his family, and he would not allow anyone to diminish them. Not here. Not now. Not like this. A few moments later, Captain Roberts, the pilot, stepped into the cabin. His face was tight, his expression almost apologetic. When the flight attendant saw him, her face visibly relaxed in relief. But Jasper's eyes sharpened as he took in the situation. He could see it clearly now. There was much more to the flight attendant's attitude than a simple mix-up with seating. "Mr. King," Captain Roberts began with forced politeness, "we have a policy about first-class seating that—" Before he could finish, Jasper cut him off. "You're the one who suggested this, weren't you?" His voice was no longer just calm. It was frosty, cutting through the air like ice. "You influenced her to ask my daughters to move." Captain Roberts stiffened. I didn't." Jasper took a step forward, his presence towering. "You didn't think I'd find out, did you? That my daughters would ever be treated like this, in my own cabin, on a flight I paid for?" His eyes flickered to the flight attendant. "You've made a mistake. It's clear now. The system, the bias, the discrimination, it's all here, laid out in front of us." The implications were undeniable. This was no simple seating error. It was about power, privilege, and the ugly, uncomfortable side of society's assumptions. As the confrontation grew, the flight attendant shot a trembling glance at the pilot. "It wasn't my fault," she pleaded. "You told me to move them." Captain Roberts hesitated, his face going pale. The truth was now exposed. The reality of the situation couldn't be ignored any longer. Jasper took a deep breath. The situation had spiraled out of control, and now the consequences were inevitable. The airline had no choice. They had to act. The flight attendant's career, the captain's position, all of it was on the line now. But for the girls? They were innocent in this. They were simply caught in the crossfire of something much bigger than them. They didn't deserve to be pawns in this cruel game. Jasper's eyes never left the flight attendant or the pilot. His voice softened just slightly, yet still held an undeniable authority. "I'll handle this," he said, his words deliberate. "But know this, every action has consequences. You've disrespected my family, and that's something I will not stand for." He turned to his daughters, his expression softening for just a moment. "Ava, Naomi, stay right here." And with a quiet strength that seemed to command the entire cabin, he delivered his final command to the flight attendants and the pilot. "You will apologize to my daughters. And it will be sincere." The silence that followed was thick. Passengers exchanged glances, unsure of what they had just witnessed, as the apology was made, not just to the twins, but to the King family as a whole. It wasn't just about words, it was about respect. Later, after the flight touched down, the media quickly caught wind of the incident. The airline issued a public apology, but the consequences were swift and severe. The flight attendant was placed on leave, and Captain Roberts was suspended pending further investigation. For Jasper, though, it wasn't about the headlines. It was about something far more important. As he and his daughters stepped off the plane, he noticed their faces had changed. They walked with more confidence, their heads held a little higher. He smiled, knowing that, despite the adversity they'd just faced, they had come out stronger on the other side. Together, they were unstoppable. As the King family made their way away from the plane, Ava and Naomi walked with a newfound sense of pride. But the scars from that moment would stay with them, lingering long after the plane had touched down. They were just two innocent girls, caught in the middle of something much bigger than they could have ever imagined. A battle they didn't understand, fighting for the basic respect and dignity that everyone, no matter their background, deserved. What would you do if you were in their shoes? How do you think we can ensure that situations like this never happen again? We want to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below and share your opinions, your stories, or just let us know what you think about what happened to Ava and Naomi. Was this behavior from a flight attendant something you've witnessed before? How do you think this situation should have been handled? Let's start the conversation.